Good choice. So, do you guys know what bragging is? Well, yeah, I see the older siblings are all up here like going, don't look at us. The little ones, you probably don't know that word yet. I think I was about 7 when I learned what bragging was, and I learned it the hard way because I was doing it. Bragging means to think really highly of yourself, to think that you're better than other people, and to go about telling everybody. And I was in the 2nd grade, and I had won a spelling bee and was going on at great length to my classmates about how smart I was. And the teacher got sick of it and looked at me and said, "Stop bragging." Which was a problem because I didn't know the word, so I had to go look it up. God has blessed each one of us with special talents and gifts. Some of us are smart, some of us are stronger, some of us are faster, some of us have ability to do art or dancing or music, some of us are good listeners. Whatever it is that we're good at, those are gifts from God, and God doesn't want us to be ashamed of those gifts. But those gifts can become a problem when we start thinking that they make us better than other people. If you've been around long enough, you know what it feels like when other people seem to be the ones who are most important. When other people make you feel like you're not good enough. Jesus loves us each exactly the way we are. We don't have to try to be better than anyone else in order for Jesus to notice us or to love us. We don't have to be better at sitting still and listening. We don't have to be better at talking. We don't have to be better at anything. All that matters is that we try to be the best that we are and to remember that whatever our special gifts are, that God gave them to us so that we could use them to love others. So that we could use those gifts to make a world in which other people know that they are good enough too. All right? Let's go get ourselves some stamps. Which hand? This one. Okay. There you go. Back. Okay. This hand? Okay. There you go. There you go. You're next. Which hand? This one? Okay. There we go. All right. Which hand? This one? Okay. There you go. This has been a wiggly morning during children's sermon time. This bunch was not bad. You should have been at 8:30. There it was not just wiggling, it was group participation all the way around. This parable that we've just heard from Luke's gospel is one of those that probably makes it seem like I don't have much of a job to do this morning. It's really quite straightforward. It begins with a couple of characters that we should recognize right off the bat if we've been paying attention over the last weeks and months. There's a Pharisee. By now we ought to know that in the society of Jesus' day that the Pharisees were some of the most respected people in the community, the movers and shakers, the leaders, and that Jesus loved to make them the butts of his jokes and the targets for his most strident criticisms. And the other character is a tax collector. And we ought to know by now that in that day and age, you couldn't get much lower in the social strata than being a tax collector, since tax collectors were collaborators with the Roman occupiers. But that over and over, Jesus seems to choose these tax collectors themselves to be the ones who would receive special blessing. So right off the bat, we probably ought to be thinking that, all right, we have figured out who the good guy and the bad guy in the story are. The Pharisee goes on into the temple and he says how wonderful he is. He doesn't lie. He tells the truth. This is a good dude. The comments he makes about tithing and about fasting, this stands in for saying that he has actually fulfilled every requirement of the law. Certainly most of us, myself included, could not come in here and do what he does. Most of us have cut a corner somewhere or other. But this guy has got it together. Of course, we also see that part of his having it all together is that he thinks that that makes him better than everyone else. Then the tax collector, who can't even get inside the doors of the temple, there's a reason why he's standing far off, says the words that I know are beloved to many of us, and I can say that because I hear many of you saying them quietly as you prepare to receive communion at the rail. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And Jesus tells us that the tax collector went home justified and that the Pharisee did not. And so we've got this all straight, right? All we need to do is be humble enough to see that we're all sinners and that we're not better than each other, and just don't do like the Pharisee and brag about how good we're doing, and then we will all be able to come into this church or another place like it, and we can all kneel down and say our very sincere prayer, "Oh Lord, I thank you that I am not like that Pharisee." And then Jesus has us. It's a good thing that he has us. Because part of the human condition, and something I've noticed, particularly part of the Christian tradition, is still this need to think ourselves other than the people around us. Now, we might not come in here and brag about how often we fast or how much we tithe, although some of us might. But I tell you what, I've been around the church enough to know that Christians are quite good at competing over who can be the most humble. The phrase that goes around is often holier than thou, but I've often thought that humbler than thou would be a better way of describing us when we try to compete with one another. Or, to paraphrase the old wrestling announcers on the weekends on TV when I was growing up, every time Christians get together, I really feel like somebody should get over the microphone and just bellow out, "Let's get ready to humble!" It's part of, unfortunately, who we are, that when we start to step away from one way of separating ourselves, that we just seem to navigate towards finding another one. Parables, though, are not supposed to be straightforward. I'm not sure exactly what this parable is about. I think I've hopefully told you that I think what it's not about, at least not entirely, although there is nothing wrong with being humble. And as I told the kids, I do not advise bragging. But the parable needs to be something more. Parables are supposed to be something that we wrestle with, that don't leave us feeling easy. They're sort of like Buddhist koans, those really simple teachings of the masters that every time you think you've got it figured out, it comes back to bite you again and send you right back to thinking that you haven't learned anything yet. So I want to spend a few more minutes wrestling with this parable, not in order to sort it out entirely, but maybe to start pointing us in some other directions. Now, one detail that we need to talk about in the parable that we probably haven't noticed yet is the language used at the end for the two men as they leave. Jesus says that the tax collector goes home justified while the Pharisee does not. And that probably sounds to us like Jesus is praising the one over the other. But the word justified does not mean better than. Justified is a legal term. It's probably more like our term pardon. Justified is for people who are not righteous. If you commit a horrible crime and the judge sentences you to prison and the governor sends you a pardon, you have been justified. You have been made righteous in the eyes of the law through no doing of your own. The Pharisee does not need to be justified. He has fulfilled the tenets of the law. He doesn't come to the temple seeking justification. That's what the tax collector comes there for. Both men come and do and get what they intended. The Pharisee comes to say thank you for his particular blessings, even if he's a little bit haughty about it. And he does that, and he goes home. That's why he was there. The tax collector, who knows that he is not a righteous man, comes seeking mercy, and he finds it. I think that the parable isn't about even this ending, but rather about the very beginning. When we hear about two men going to the temple to pray, and when we hear that it's a Pharisee and a tax collector, we immediately stop seeing them as two identical children of God. And we start trying to figure out which one of them is us and which one of them is the other guy. Or which one of them's the good guy, which one of them's the bad guy. Who does the teacher approve of more? And that's really the trap. If we see ourselves as we have been created, simply as children of God, neither better than nor worse than any other, but simply as one who already is blessed and one who already and always needs blessing. Then the rest of the parable sort of starts to fall away. We don't need to separate ourselves. All we need to do is come before the throne of grace, ready to be loved, ready to love, ready to know that whatever blessings have been given to us, whatever mercy has been showered on us, whether we deserve it or not, that those things have been given to us not for ourselves, but so that we might use them in turn to bless others, that we might use them in turn to build up God's kingdom, that we might use them in turn to let others know that they too are God's beloved children, already good enough to receive the love and mercy of God.